More women are working, more women are making more money. Women are getting these vice president jobs and the executive jobs and things like that, but that the framing around specifically money hasn't necessarily changed.
Having a prenup is having just an adult conversation that says, look, when we come into this marriage together, we have a very good understanding that we know you came in with these assets and liabilities, and I came in with these assets and liabilities, and there's an understanding that we have these, and this is how we're going to manage this together, and we both agree on that.
The women that I've met, adult women, who are really comfortable with money are the ones whose parents, and in particular their fathers, did what you suggested.
Women are behind already because they take what's given to them and they don't negotiate.
So what's the way out? Welcome to a new edition of Disrupt the Podcast with your co-hosts, Andrés Tapia
and Eloiza Domingo,
where we challenge conventional wisdom and we look at the new ways that are shaping our future.
Awesome. And on this episode, we are talking about the disruption of money, of all things. And we're very excited to have a special guest with us today. And I'm going to have her actually introduce herself to us. But let me just tell I'm actually really excited, Andrés, because usually what we do when we have guests is we have guests that Andrés knows. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, one of the first times that I'm actually bringing one of my colleagues and friends. So
you're roping them in.
I know, roping them in.
That's how it works.
It is. I agree. And Barb and I met actually. There's a network here in our village called Grateful Connections of women entrepreneurs who are supporting one another, which I think is amazing. And so we met in that, kind of space, and we were actually able to talk about the disruption of money, finances. And I'm telling you what, when I met Barb, I thought, oh my gosh, personally. And on this podcast, I've talked about my divorce and I've talked about the impact of the divorce financially and those kinds of things. And Barb actually really helped me to kind of even think about it further. So without further ado, I would really love for Barb to actually introduce herself to you, and then we're going to have a little conversation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me on your Disrupt podcast. I'm excited to be here and always thrilled to talk about women and money. And my name is Dr. Barbara Provost. People just call me Barb, and I am the founder of PurseStrings.
Love the name.
I know,
thank
that's a
you.
nice cool
Yeah,
name.
and I created PurseStrings, and I had the name before I really had the whole model built out, because PurseStrings is a powerful name. Yet it's a name that's fluid, because what do? We tighten our purse strings when we need to tighten our pocketbook a little bit. We loosen it when we're a little bit more flush.
Oh, yeah.
But we are in control, right? And it's a feminine name, I believe.
Yeah.
So PurseStrings was what I wanted to name my business, because I knew I wanted to work with women and money based on all of my background, my research, my observations, my focus groups, and everything that I learned around women and their experiences with money.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, Andrés, I'm going to kind of hand it to you, actually, because I've had a great opportunity to speak with Barb, so I'd love for you to help lead us in this discussion. For our audience members, let me kind of rewind a little bit. I talked about that the topic is about disruption of money. It's actually disruption of money through the lens of gender, and this concept that Barb brings, this expertise around women and money, which I think is actually a really cool twist.
Yeah, and actually, as we were preparing to have this conversation, as we've been paying attention to what Barb has to say, there is the first question is going to come right here. Major fundamental structural differences between how women and men manage money, or their relationship with money, and that starts from very early on. So can we start with just what are some of those differences, and then we'll explain where do those differences emerge from?
Sure. Well, if we all think back about our childhood, it's different for everybody. And the way money was discussed, or maybe not even discussed in our households, and kind of the emotions or the conversations or the lack of conversations that it created. So was money discussed or not? And if it was discussed, did it create angst? Did it create creativity and lots of good discussion? Or did it create gnashing of teeth and throwing of plates? I mean, it could be different for everybody. So how did the household itself have discussions, if they did, around money? And then when we branch out and think about our religion, I grew up in a Catholic upbringing where we all had to put a little something in the till, right? Every week, or tithe or something. Yeah. Give to those who were less fortunate. Was a big part of our upbringing.
Yeah.
But then think about our community. What did we have to give to our community? So there's a lot of different money type exposures and influences that kind of get woven into the thoughts about how we think about money. And it's so covert that I don't even think we think about it. It just gets woven into who we are as people.
Yeah.
And we don't realize it until maybe we get into these conversations that get so sideways, either in relationships or something like that, as we approach money. And one conversation I always like to say is, when you're in relationship, what is the dollar amount that you have with your partner that you think, I better check in on this spend before I do it? Is it $500? Is it $5,000? Is it $500,000? It's interesting when I ask that question. It's very thought-provoking. But all of that around money is around where do these knee-jerk reactions around your decision-making, your thoughts about money, your feelings about money, your intuition, and your internal senses around money come from?
Yeah.
So Barb, if we could anchor this, let's do a drill down first. On what are the differences among adult women and adult men around money. And we want to drill down on that and really explore it. And then we want to sort of go through that mind and say, where were the roots of these differences here? So lay it out for us.
Adult men and women?
Yes. And whether they're in relationship or not. I mean, we want to talk about the whole constellation.
Well, typically when you look at men, a lot of the messaging towards men is men invest, men manage the money, men make the money decisions. He's the household, provider, if you will. And women are kind of the ones who manage the household, make the operations run, care for the children, so don't really have a lot of the money, senses or decision making or things like that. So think about it, when women get married, they used to give a dowry, or they give their name over, and that whole thing is, I'm your property now, know. And I did not change my name when I get married, by the way, both times.
You were consistent.
Yeah, I'm consistent. But, it's kind of that behavior. When you think about it, that's where that comes from. I'm your property. And you kind of own what's happening in the household. So you kind of don't decide what the decision-making process is. So therefore, you don't need to know about how money works, or what, how to spend or how to save or how to invest. And so today it's hurt us because when you look at financial institutions, they are male models built by men for men to sell to men. And that model still stands today. I would say those models are very slow to change. They're still built that way today, and that's why today women are very behind in their ability to save for their financial future.
So just to kind of catch us all up and our listeners, when you were talking about dowry, that seemed like a throwback. Right? Who does dowry now, right? And yet you put it on the table as something that sort of is affecting today.
Yeah.
And then you said, and then the models of banks and other companies, wealth management companies, also are based on these throwback models. But here's my question. But today is not like yesterday, meaning women today, at least overall, have careers and they're earning a lot more money than back then. They, in theory, have more independence and agency. So can you marry these things? How could it be that you're talking about these throwback concepts like dowry and Wall Street like it used to be, and say that it's relevant today when it seems to be that many women seem to be earning a lot more money?
So do you know when women could first get their own credit card in their own name? Do you know what year that was?
Tell me.
1974.
Oh, wow.
We have a very narrow history for women in their independence with money.
Wow.
So think about that. Women could not get their own credit, could not buy their own home. Women were called spinsters.
In the 70s?
Yeah,
when did that change about
in the
homes?
70s.
Yeah,
the
the
whole
70s.
thing in the 70s.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
think about, we have a very short history. So men had everything. Women's had 50 years. So we've done a lot in 50 years, but we have certainly not done enough. And even within that 50 years, we still have to overcome, the ability to get a job and not get fired because we're pregnant or something like that. So there's a lot of other ability to earn a wage that we've had to overcome just because we're women and maybe we're having a baby. You couldn't work then. So even though you say, well, look, today women are doing all these grandiose things, you know what? Yes, we've done a lot of work. We've come very far, but in a very narrow window.
Yeah, and I appreciate also, Barb, that you're mentioning. It's interesting how you talked about the framing, and you layered this idea of religion, community, and Andrés and I often talk about these concepts of race and culture, as well, and you layer that on top. For me, as a Filipina female, you and I talked about this. Roman Catholic family, immigrant family, both of my parents are physicians. So we did not grow up with money. We had money. But it's really interesting because of all of that, just like you said, it was framed almost exactly in the stereotype that you talked about, that both of my parents were doctors, but my dad made the money. And I was like, well, Mom is a doctor too, Dad made the money. Dad brought it home. And then as the firstborn daughter, so the first kind of the next matriarch of the family, what was interesting is then I just had to follow my mom. So it was like, we're going to let you spend the money to be pretty and successful, but you're not really going to know what it is. You just go and pick out what you want, and then we give it to you. And aren't you, and I remember this, go tell Dad thank you. And I'm like, but you also... I remember that my mom would underline that. Go tell Dad thank you because you just got a Barbie. You just got a new dress. You got new shoes. You got new pom-poms as a cheerleader, whatever. It was like, go tell Dad thank you. So my framing is not only that, but it was also reinforced. I go tell Dad thank you. And I have no clue where is this money coming from, know? And so when I went into my marriage, it was very much like that. I have no clue where this money, it just shows up. I also had the expectation that you just make a lot. I just was like, oh, it's just there, and so the guy is there and somehow there's money there. And I always fell into this trap of, well, I want these shoes. So this threshold that you talk about, it wasn't even a threshold. It was just, I want these shoes. Good? Sure. Thank you. I was making more than my ex-husband, significantly more than my ex-husband, but that's just.
You thanked him for the shoes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it wasn't until I got the divorce that I was like, and I remember me telling you this, I didn't know how to pay for water. When I got, this space, I was like, where does the water come from? And I was like, should I call someone? How do you pay for this? So the reason I'm underlining this is, and to give everybody kind of a context, is that this is very real. The framing that you talk about is very real, and it's actually paralyzing.
Oh yeah.
Even for me, I consider myself, smart and worldly and and intelligent, and I know what I'm doing. I just remember thinking, like, does somebody come and get the trash? Like, do you just give them cash, or what do you do?
So Barb, as we listen to Eloiza's story, and now you're dealing with several hundreds of women that over the years, how common is what Eloiza's saying, and what are the underlying dynamics that are taking place?
Well, I think a lot of this stems from, our role as women is to be taken care of. And our role is to, when I was in high school, what did I learn? Cooking, sewing. We never had finance. We never had woodworking. We could never be on the basketball team. We had to be the cheerleader. It was very defined on what was a woman's responsibility and a man's responsibility, or boys and girls, even in our own household. I mean, there were boy chores and there were girl chores. It was very defined. And it just tells us kind of who owns what role and what responsibility. And so there are things I don't know how to do. Something happens with a car, I'm like, oh no, I have no idea because no one ever taught me that, and I was not interested in learning. But my upbringing was similar yet different. We gave, of course, we did. I grew up in a very frugal household, large family. Catholic, Irish Catholic, large family. But we were kind of told to sink or swim, get out on your own and make it happen. So I was out at 18 and put myself through school and all of that, just working a couple of jobs and going to school at the same time. So my work ethic was survival mode. So it was just different.
Well, what I think is interesting, I'm going to kind of underline what Andrés said earlier. It's almost like two trains are moving. One train is not as fast as the other. That Andrés is right. More women are working, more women are making more money. Women are getting these vice president jobs and the executive jobs and things like that. But that the framing around specifically money hasn't necessarily changed.
Oh, no.
And I remember, and you and I have talked about this concept, and here on our podcast, we've talked about this concept of what I call high asset women who have money, agency because of it, the ability to make decisions because of it. But the thing is that then that woman is seen as, bold in a bad way, like, what do you think, so you're high maintenance, she doesn't have a partner. She doesn't, it's just like too much. But then if it was a male that had the money and making
totally
the decision, it's totally different. It's like, well, of course you have money. Of course you can have agency. Of course you can make, that decision. And so I have found that a lot as I have come into title and money and wealth. I have been put into a different category, and it's like, well, what do so what you've reached this category, and so you don't need help, but then I'm sitting here, I'm like, I legitimately don't know how to do, any of this.
So to that point, Barb, I want to get a little bit more handle on, in adult relationships, what are the different behaviors that emerge around money? Right, given this socialization, which we're going to explore more deeply, but I just want to do day to day, as decisions be made about investments or a spend or buying a house or going on vacation, right, or even the day to day, right, like buying a pair of shoes or where do you grocery shop or whatever. Money affects everything. How do these gender dynamics show up? How is it different? What is? This gives this guy an inside view of how women are viewing something that the archetypical guy is looking at that very same situation differently.
Yeah.
Well, it's different for everybody. What I've seen typically is let's take a couple who's married and she is running the household, right? She's taking care of the kids, buying the groceries, getting what the children need. She's actually making many, many household decisions and spending a lot of the money in a way that manages the household operations, making sure the kids have clothes. She has clothes, he has clothes, whatever utilities need to get paid or whatever on the operations of the household. She's not making the larger decisions typically on, what car we're going to buy, what investments we're going to make, what we're going to do in the 401k. Typically, he's making those decisions, having the conversations with the financial professionals. Sometimes she comes, sometimes she doesn't. That's not, I don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush, but I do see that a lot. And so they're kind of going in that realm. And then maybe he's saying, you're spending too much money, but she doesn't really get a handle on, well, how much money is he actually making? I don't know. I just have to buy this for the kids, and I have to buy that for the kids, and the kids need to go to camp and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, well, you're spending too much money. But she's like, well, I still want to go to TJ Maxx or this and that and the other one, but they're not talking about what's the budget, what do we have to spend, what kind of money's coming in, what kind of money's going out, how are we planning for a trip with the children, how are we planning for a 529 for the kids, not everybody's having those kinds of conversations. And I would argue that a lot of women may not even know how much money their husbands are making or what kind of money is coming into the household or how much money is coming out of that paycheck and going into a retirement fund for him. And she may not even have a retirement fund for her, which she should have, a spousal IRA if she's not working, but that's probably not happening. So how much debt is there? How much debt is on that credit card? Maybe she's not paying the credit card. She doesn't know there's $15,000 of debt on a 28% credit card because she's just managing the household operations. And he's like, well, I'll pay the balance, I'll pay the minimum, but we got to just get these bill paid. So they're kind of getting deep. And then they realize we really want to go to Disney. Well, we got a lot of cards to play. Well, let's take a line of credit out on the house and just pay that off. Now we're losing equity in the house, but that's okay. We're going to be here for a while. And now our credit card's paid off. Now we can do that Disney trip. I don't know. Things get crazy like that, right? I've seen a lot of craziness like this go on just because they're trying to do what they want to do in their lives. They're not really getting a handle on where the money is, where it's going. They don't have a dedicated plan. They don't really understand how money works and how they can best leverage it for themselves.
So we've been spending time looking at sort of a traditional marriage relationships. But do these dynamics around money also manifest for single women, right? Are they, in compare like sort of an archetypical single woman, same age, archetypical single man, obviously to your point, these are broad strokes and different women and men will do differently. But the bell curve of behavior is what we're looking at. Are single women in that dynamic also making different kinds of decisions? And let's say, and we're comparing two working people.
Right.
Two working people, they're both single, they don't know each other, so it's not a relationship. Yep. But what's a typical trajectory where the money thing is starting to Eloiza's point, one is on a faster track than the other?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this about pay. So when a woman gets a job and she gets offered a pay, most of the time she does not negotiate that. She takes the pay. Yeah. Men negotiate. So right out of the gate, women are behind. And if there's a pay increase, she typically doesn't negotiate. And men will negotiate. So what happens is women are behind already because they take what's given to them and they don't negotiate, which is really, really something we need to teach women to do. Negotiate for, even if it's not more pay, maybe it's some other kind of benefit that you can negotiate for. So that's number one. Number two is, if you're single, so, you don't know what other responsibilities you have, you may still be pulled out of the workforce. You have a sick mom that you have to take care of. So that's still an impact that you're still taking care of. Remember, typically men have someone at home who's handling a lot of things that are happening in a household that typically women don't have a wife at home, typically. Yep. Some do, most don't. But also, people also have money that go into their retirement account, 401k. Are they looking at what it's being invested in? They're like, I'm making my contributions, but are they really looking at it from a financial standpoint and saying, what are these investments being invested in? And having that conversation and saying, am I maxing it out to the max? Can I put more in something else if I still have more left over, or should I? So having those types of financial conversations. Or they might say, oh, I'm maxing that out, so now I can spend the rest of it. So they're spending the rest of it, and they're going out and bottle service or whatever they might do or whatever. Are they still making a dedicated plan for themselves? Because, again, if they're single on their own, single for the rest of their lives, they're still going to age alone. It's going to be expensive. Are they making a plan for themselves?
And I think that's what's really interesting to me as I'm listening to this, because your question, Andrés, right now we've been kind of historically talking about, not historically, but, kind of over time talking about money and in a relationship. Mm-hmm. This idea of being single, it then forces me to think about, so it's actually the women's relationship with just money, in the triangulation of it, certainly, yes, I'm handling my partner, and then there's money, but regardless, if you take that partner out, it's still the relationship between the female and money. Mm-hmm. And it really is interesting to me how, because of the framing that you talked about earlier, the woman feels as if she doesn't have even the power to enter into a relationship with money, because it's like, well, that's, I'm just being given the money. Here's a promotion, and I'm just going to be like, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Exactly.
Thank you, kind sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. There is not an interaction with, so the relationship, which Andrés and I have talked about, is male to, but if you take away the dude or you take away the partner, whoever it is, it's still the relationship with a woman, and the woman is still not. I'm just. Thank you so much. I'm just the receiving party.
Yes.
I think that's really fascinating because, again, I'm sitting here selfishly thinking, oh my gosh, I have never had a relationship with money until recent. When I became kind of sovereign in my money, but I had to force myself to do that. But even then, I still, like, I'll be honest with you, right now I need to redo my home budget. I was actually supposed to do that like 2 months ago. My financial advisor is like, hello, because I have anxiety about it, because I don't like having a relationship with my money. I just don't. Even though I'm comfortable with it, I don't like approaching or engaging in these conversations because of the frame that I've always had. So it is a constant battle between me and this relationship with money.
So Barb,
but that happens all the time. I mean, that's what I see. That's the biggest nut we have to crack is women don't want to address it.
Yeah.
I love this concept of the relationship with, right? So if you use the relationship paradigm of women's relationship with money, so we've talked about with men. Okay, put that.
Sure, put that.
What does that relationship look like? How would you characterize that relationship currently in its maybe dysfunction? And what would be a healthy female relationship with money?
So I would say a lot of it is I feel ashamed that I don't understand you if I were talking to money. Okay. I feel, I would feel like I should know more about you and I don't. I feel like I should want you, but I'm not quite sure if I deserve you. Things like that. I feel like I work hard to get you, but yet do I work hard enough to get you? Am I worthy of you? And so many people have told me that I don't really deserve you. And if you're given to me, well, I should also share you with other people and give you to other things like my community. And I should give you to the church and I should give you to help other people and so on. However, it should be, heck, I work really hard. Come on, give it all to me because I work hard. I deserve it. I went to school and I studied hard so I could do these great things to serve the world. And that then in turn gives me the ability to earn money. So I should get it because I can do great things with me. I could use you really well. If you give me really good money, I can do great things for my family. I can do great things for the world. I could do great things for, the universe. I could invest you really well so other things get happening. But, we have to reframe that, and that reframing is really, really hard to do.
And if I could connect another dot, when you're talking about traditional view of how women will spend to maintain the household without really understanding, sort of where the money is coming from, it's almost like the relationship is one of consumption as opposed to one of investment. Like the money can be leveraged also, right? Not just used or used up, but the money can make money. Is there a dynamic there as well?
Well, I would say they're using it to care and operate within the household. But I will say the messaging to women is quit spending, and the messaging to men is invest.
Yeah. That's the sort of the messages that I want to get to it in just a moment. Just from some statistics perspective, all the dynamics that you've been talking about, Barb, still after all these years, women are making 83 to 85% of men's pay, right? Number one. And then to your issue of retirement, the median retirement savings is $44,000 for women versus $91,000 for men. And that's sort of medium. And then if you go even higher income, those disparities, just of sheer amounts, get significantly larger.
And can I tell you something about that 83 cents? That's dropped back this year to 81. And actually,
we've gone backwards.
Yeah, we've gone backwards. And actually, that number is for white women. Oh. So when you look at Black women, when you look at Latina women, when you look at LGBTQ women, all of those have different dates throughout the year, and they drop back as far as November.
What do you mean by dates?
So there's a date in March, typically. It's around March 13th or 18th. It's called Equal Pay Day. And that is the day in which women will make the same amount of money as men did the previous year. So if white women are making 83 cents or 81 cents on the dollar, they have to work until March the next year to make the same amount of money as men made the previous year. That's called Equal Pay Day. Now we're at equal pay in March of the following year as men made the year before, okay? For white women. But you have to, I don't know all the dates off the top of my head, but you have to go further into the year for dates in June, July, August, September, all the way through to November to look at the different dates for Equal Pay Day for Black women, for Latina women, for Indigenous women, for LGBTQ women. And those are on the website. I have those dates if you'd like to see them, that will tell you in 2026 what are the equal pay days for the rest of those.
And we'll actually let our viewers know what your website is.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting to listen how when you, first of all, I was so intrigued, and side note, off of the recording, I love how you talked about money as a thing, as a person. You know, that was so interesting. Like, I deserve you. I worked hard for you. I can use you. I don't know if anybody's ever, that's really interesting to me. But the reason as I was listening, as you were talking through that, I thought, well, we've thought about the relationship with money in terms of quantitative, you know, so here is this, and then I do this, and there is relatively transactional. But, you know, as as you were talking, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this relationship with money for women also qualitatively tells women who you are.
Oh yeah.
How much you're worth.
What you're worth.
What you're worth, if you're pretty enough, if you deserve, this concept of deserve. So it qualitatively creates this dichotomy, and it really kind of underpins this constant, you know, cycle, you know, with men. So it's really interesting to me how deep we're going.
Well, actually, let's stay with the relationship one, right? Relationship with men, relationship with money. But what does that mean for the relationship of the woman with herself?
It's tough out there. It really is, because there's so many negative messages for women, right? Why are we spending so much money on our hair, on our nails, on our makeup, on all these expensive, you know, look at these people, they have the Botox, the this, the that. They're unrecognizable after a while, right? Because they're using their money so that they can keep up with what society, men, people say is what we should be looking like, right? So it's the outside exterior of us instead of interior of who we are as people, what we stand for, what we're about, our values, all of that. It's more of the external exposure. You know, we're never going to fit. No matter what you look like, you're never going to be pretty enough, tall enough, thin enough, whatever. It's about thinking about money as a way of, we always say, you know, you vote with your dollars and you should spend with your values. So what's important to you is where you spend your money, you're voting with your dollars. And it's interesting to see where people put their money, because we believe that's what they're voting for.
Wow. And one other follow-up on the relationship. What's the relationship between women and creators of products and services? Because when we were preparing with you before, there was sort of this economic scale that for, you know, similar type of clothing, similar type of services, what men are charged versus women. Can you go down that litany?
The pink tax.
What is the pink tax?
The pink tax is a very covert way for brands to charge women for products that are the same that men use. So think about the razors as a primary example. A Bic blue razor, same razor. Men typically will pick the blue. Women will pick the pink. It's the exact same razor. It's at least $1 more for the same package. And I've tested it, and I've seen it tested before. But if you look at products like shampoo, you look at shaving cream, you look at all those products that are for women and men, the men's products are cheaper than the women's products. And this has been shown to be throughout even children's clothing, children's bicycles, things like that. So even I told you about going to the dry cleaners. My, cotton button-down shirt, nothing fancy, wasn't silk, was more expensive than my husband's cotton button-down shirt because they said it was a woman's shirt and the women's mannequin or whatever, they don't have at the cleaners. And this is across cleaners. I mean, cleaners have said this, is it a woman or a man? Because it's more for the women. Wow. It just blows my mind. Come on, get a mannequin that fits a woman then.
And if you could go even further, because I want our listeners to know how extensive this is. I mean, it was about all kinds of other personal use products.
Haircuts. And
Yeah, haircuts. You know what? I teach this class, and often I want financial professionals to like spend a day in the life of a woman. Like, what does it cost to be a woman? Just be in her shoes. Pink tax, she's up against, right? Pay gap, she's up against. She's not going to negotiate because she's afraid she won't get the job, so she just takes what she is. So she's already behind, right? So she's got to pay more for a haircut. So oftentimes I'll say, what do you pay for a haircut? And they'll go, oh, $40 to $60. And I'll say to the women, what do you pay? And they'll be like, $125, but don't tell my husband, you know. And I'll go, is that just for the haircut? And they're like, yes. I'm like, okay, let's add on some color. And they're like, oh my God, $380. And that doesn't include the tip, you know. And I'm like, okay, what about...
And women are going to tip more than the guys.
Oh, 20% and on a bigger, you know, dollar amount. That's more money,
That's
you
more.
know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then what about getting your nails done? $100 easy. Every other week or once a month, you know. That's that. And, you know, who knows what other things women have to get done to keep themselves maintained. It's a fortune to keep maintenance. And I said, well, just don't do it, right?
But then you talked about, so first on the pink tax, you know, in one of my videos, I talk about Nike did that, actually. Nike took some of their shoes and they just made them pink, put them in a pink box, sold them as women's shoes for a higher, you know, amount. And people are like, oh my gosh, pink it, shrink it.
Yeah.
It went out. So it was easier actually on the manufacturer to do that, but they just charged more. So Nike has even done that.
Oh, yeah.
But you've also talked about, let's go back to what you just said. So, okay, so what's the risk of me not cutting my hair, getting it colored, looking the way that I do, making sure that everything is, you know, together. And then I walk into a board meeting
Right.
and I don't look, you know, that way. I've had to spend all of this and thinking, I'm just going to be good. I'm good. You know, I'm not going to fall into this. Yeah, I'm still qualified. I'm not going to fall into this pink tax, but I know what the risk is going to be. I know what it is. You know, it's like, she's not, I'm sorry, you're
so
not put
get
together.
It going, right? It's
yeah,
like,
exactly. So of course I have to pay because of course I have to enable this system in order for me to stay in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the way out?
That's the $64,000 question.
Is that if women's paid $64,000 or
number? You know what? I believe, and that's why I started PurseStrings, is we just need to start educating women. I mean, education is the core to really learning about how money works, how to negotiate, how to make good financial decisions, I say, for themselves, their families, their businesses, and just to know what they're up against. You know, are we going to solve the world problems? No, but knowledge is power. And at least you go in knowing, armed with information.
And so if I came to you, I was a client of yours. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. Walk me through what would you do first with me?
I would ask you, what's your concern? What can I help you with today? So what would be the concern of yours?
So if I said similar to this, as I said, you know, I want to, I'm a single woman. I have no clue how to pay for water. I don't know any of this. I don't know where any of my money is, you know, because I just got out of this relationship. My ex-husband would run all of this. You know, I actually don't know where anything is.
Okay.
How would you help me?
I would say, I'm so glad you came to us. Thank you for joining us. And I'm glad you came forward. Most people are really afraid to be that vulnerable. So, but that all stops at PurseStrings. And what PurseStrings does is we provide women all sorts of resources. So we're going to help you out here. My role is that I'm here to provide you with the tools and resources. I would provide you with the tools that you would need, starting probably with a worksheet called Where's My Money Going? So I would walk you through that worksheet and tell you how to you really get a handle on what money's coming into you, walk you through how you can figure that out, and then what are all the expenses that you're paying every month and where you can find that information. And then once you do that, what does that mean to you? What do those numbers mean and how you can reflect on that? Everything's in that worksheet. And then quite possibly, I would say, you know, the best next step for you would be to work with a financial coach or a money coach, of which we have several of them in our directory. And I would direct you to navigate that directory. We could do it together or you could do it on your own. And they're virtual or in person. And you could just say, you know, pick one that you vibe with. They have very robust directories. Call them. They each have a 20-minute free consultation. Pick one that you vibe with and then start working with them. That's an investment in yourself and in your future to get yourself in a place that you have education, knowledge, routine, and a way to get a handle on your money.
Coaching. And remind me, all of your coaches and financial advisors are women.
Not all of them.
Not all of them. Okay.
Most, but not all.
Okay.
There are some men who are really dedicated to working with women, and they come from a place where maybe many have come from a place where they've helped their moms through very difficult situations, and that's why they focus on women.
Got it.
So, Barb, you have said that many women learn money through crises. Divorce, caregiving, job loss. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
And how does that show up at your doorstep when people connect with you?
Yeah, and this is why we want to get ahead of it. But oftentimes women will come and say, I've had women come and say, I have 3 kids. My husband works. I left the workforce because we have 3 children and, I needed to manage them. I did have student loans. He said he'd pay for them while I was out of the workforce. But now I think he's hiding money. I think he's having an affair. I'm finding all these, things that are going on and I'm not quite sure where the money's at. And she's just lost a handle on a lot of the foundations of the monies in the household. And when she asks about it, there's a fighting going on. He doesn't want to share her number. She doesn't even know if her names are on the accounts and things like that. That's really unfortunate, and that's why we say you need to have monthly meetings with your mate on, money conversations. Where's the money? Like, have a list of where your money's at. What accounts do we have? What are the balances? Have access to it, whatever. But women need to get in front of those conversations because that's way down the road where you now have to find almost like a forensic accountant or somebody to help you really find out where's the money. It's going to create, attorneys. It's going to cost some money to find out really what's going on, and you may never find out what's really going on, but you're going to be in a pickle, especially if you have young children. So, or people will say, I've had friends whose husbands have just dropped dead, and they were like rummaging for, does he have a life insurance policy? Look through a desk, look through this, look through that, not knowing where papers are. You just don't want to be in that place of shock and grief and disbelief and not knowing anything. And many, many women find themselves in that place, or they're handed divorce papers unknowingly. And that person who is handing you divorce papers, they've been gone for a year mentally.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, obviously it's almost like a crisis. It's
a crisis, yes.
And you have ways of, okay, you're in a crisis, let me help you. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's difficult.
It's very difficult.
And some things are kind of a little too late.
Yes.
Right? So, but you have ways of doing it. But now let's back up because we have all kinds of demographics watching the show. And for the single women out there, right, who are going to make a decision to hook up with somebody or not, for long-term or not, but when they still have a chance to maybe make choices differently.
And be proactive.
Yes.
Yeah.
What would you, how do you advise them so they avoid the trap that several women already are, that now they're limited in their options? How do you make sure they're not limited in their options?
Yes. I would say if you're going to partner with somebody, that you make sure you have your money separate and that you have a full understanding of your partner's assets and debts and vice versa, right? Like if you're going to get married or be in a long-term partnership, you could have a prenup. And that is certainly just an opportunity for each to expose your assets and liabilities and where you stand. And really, when you think about it, it's a smart thing to do, because then if you really love someone, you shouldn't be afraid to hide any of that. You should be able to manage, work through it, understand, and make decisions about how you're going to handle that.
And I think that's, so one thing that I'm going to ask you to talk about, though, is you introduced to Andrés and me this concept of a post-nup as well. I had never heard of that, first of all.
Okay.
So I think that's really interesting. So I'd love for you to describe that to our viewers. But I think that's the other thing, too. I remember when I got into my relationship with my ex-husband, and I was saying to my dad, I'm so happy, I'm so happy, I'm going to get married, and he just looked at me and said, happiness has nothing to do with it. And he said, how are you going to make money? How are you going to be successful? And I thought then, my gosh, that's so unromantic,
Well, it is.
Yeah, it is. And but when I got into my crisis situation, which was the divorce, and all of that was gone, And I remember going to my lawyer and his lawyer, and I was like, well, this didn't work, and he wasn't like this, and, my ex, well, she did this, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I remember both of our lawyers said, right now, this is a financial conversation.
I don't care.
It doesn't really matter, who did what. If somebody had an affair, it didn't really matter. At this point, we're going to sever the financial relation between the two of you. You don't have a prenup. And so let's just figure it out. It just goes 50-50. And I remember it was whittled down very quickly in front of me. And that I thought, we've been married for 16 years. We have 4 children. And 5 dogs. And what did you just say? Like, and this is just going to be like, who gets this couch? Are you going to live in the marital home? How much do you make? And there was an algorithm, and it just crumbled in front of me. And it was so unemotional. But looking back on that, I thought, man, if I could do it again, I would have really thought about that.
But how do you bridge the gap? Because romance, is still a very powerful human desire, and that's what attracts people. How do you honor the romance and also honor the relationship with money, right? Because this is a relationship, right? The romance, obviously. But now we've talked about but the relationship with money is also something you got to care for. How do you bridge this? And you talked about the prenup and the postnup, and I'm still not quite clear about what's pre and what's post. So if you can explain that. But then how do you reconcile the romance and the non-romance, but yet the necessity of it all working on the context of a relationship?
Well, it takes being adults, really. It really does take being brave and being adult about it, because like what happened to you, if you don't have a prenup, the state will have one for you.
Yeah.
And they had one for you,
Yeah,
right?
they
They said, okay, you don't have one? Okay, here's what it's going to be then, right? And they gave it to you.
Yep.
And
You're going to have one anyway.
yeah.
Right.
By
They're
default?
going to decide.
Or you're going to have agency.
Great point.
Exactly. So, and you'll want a prenup, especially if things are, one has a lot of debt, or one has a lot of money, or one has certain assets, or one has a business, or, there are some things that are kind of inequitable in ways that you want to make it noted or documented. So that's why you want to make sure you have a prenup, and make sure it's just laid out there so everyone understands this is the playing field that we're starting out in, right? And you have to be adult about it. And it's interesting, like, why would that be, for me, why would that be difficult? I mean, we did that anyway, my husband and I, my second husband and I, we just laid it all out. That's what we have. It was very similar, actually. So there was not really a big deal about it. You would want a postnup if one of them, something happened. I bought a business and it put me I took on a lot of debt. This person, like, you did that? I don't want any part of that debt. You did that. So
this is during the relationship.
Yeah, during the marriage.
The marriage.
To create a new one.
Yeah.
That would be a postnup. So like if we get divorced, if we get divorced and during our marriage, some big thing changed, like you took a big amount of debt for a business.
Okay, I didn't.
And I don't want any part of that. I want to make sure that we have that documented so that doesn't hurt me or whatever it might be. Or you had a big windfall and I don't know, or you had a big inheritance or something happened that you wanted to make sure was documented. Or you might say, I have a couple and they have a podcast and they said, we did a postnup and we just said, hey, if we ever get divorced, we have 2 children, we made line by line where those kids were going to school, how we were going to pay for it, who had the house, who had to get an apartment, how they were going to furnish it, what the child care would be, everything. So they knew if they did get divorced, it was all planned out.
But so I want to make sure though, because I know many of our viewers are watching this, and even in celebrity marriages, it's like, oh my God, they had a prenup. That is it's offensive. People think that that's offensive. If as a partner I come and I want to marry Andrés, we're in love, and I said, so let's get a prenup. It would not be uncommon that the partner is like, oh, you don't love me. Like I can't, so, because that is really, I mean, I'm thinking about celebrity marriages and marriages, of my friends. And I've asked them post my divorce, hindsight is 2020, saying, hey, did you get a prenup? A real conversation. Yeah. Eloiza, I love him. I am not going to bridge that conversation.
It's not about that. We have to reframe some conversations here. As our demographics have changed And things have changed. We're not living in those old systems anymore. We have to reframe a lot of things. Another one is bankruptcy. We can talk about that at another time, but we can reframe bankruptcy. It's not a dirty word anymore.
What's the reframe then? Just to get past the taboo or the shock or that's inappropriate. Yeah. What's the reframe?
That having a prenup is having just an adult conversation that says, look, when we come into this marriage together, we have a very good understanding that we know you came in with these assets and liabilities, and I came in with these assets and liabilities, and there's an understanding that we have these, and this is how we're going to manage this together, and we both agree on that.
See, and so I think this is a good reframing, because stereotypically people come in and you see a prenup, and that if you request a prenup or you ask for a prenup, it then assumes we will get divorced at some point. So I'm just kind of like preempting, I think that's where people think it's, no, I'm going to be with this person forever. We don't need this.
Well, and the romantic in me finds, and the storyteller feels that you can reconcile this. The reframe for me is that this is a fuller, more mature way of loving.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Because loving is really being able to accept the other person for all they have, their assets and liabilities, their backstory, their quirks, their weaknesses and their strengths. And then money is no different. Like whatever assets, I love how you say, and their financial assets and liabilities. So if we're putting everything on the table and saying we're going to have a life together, let's kind of have a life together and see what it is. And life is unpredictable. Mm-hmm. So let's have a plan for how we can be as loving toward each other as possible in the moment where we are actually most connected and most in love. It's probably a pretty good way to have a more...
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah. Because you might find a couple where one of them says, then I'm going to have to admit that I have $50,000 in credit card debt.
See, yeah.
And if then you have another discussion. Do you want to marry that person?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to?
That's real.
Yeah, that's real.
That's real.
You have to decide that now, not 3 years after you realize we're never going to be able to buy that house or have that baby or whatever because we are in so much debt. And he doesn't know how to manage money.
Wow. So we only have a few minutes left. One more question for you, and then we're going to do our Disrupt GPS segment. But you use the word indoctrination, or it could be socialization. But Eloiza and I like indoctrination because there's sort of like a forcedness to it. Because socialization is like, this is how you get along in the world in a very, let's say, benign way. But indoctrination is like, there's a point of view here that may not be beneficial for you, but we're going to indoctrinate you into that. Mm-hmm. Tell us, what are the ways in which girls are indoctrinated that then those messages stick with them, that then set them up for these dilemmas that you've laid out for us?
My daughter came home one day and said, we were playing field hockey, and they gave the boys the sticks that were made of wood, and they gave the girls the ones made of foam. No. And she said, and that wasn't fair. And I said, what did you say? And she said, I didn't say anything. And I said, why didn't you say anything? She's like, well, and I said, you have every right to say, how about in 10 minutes we switch or something like that, And she was playing the drums in the band, and another boy came in to play the drums, and they moved her over and gave her the triangle. So things like this happen all the time to girls. These are just two little...
Throw things out the window.
Yeah, these are just two little sample that, you can expedite these. These are happening every single day. And these are just two examples that I could just spit off the top of my head where this is happening, where they're pushed aside. So the whole thing with girls are not good with math, right? So boys are always the ones who are the engineers. But then they realize, girls are pretty good with math. But if you see the girls in the engineering, it's kind of like, why are the girls in the engineering? Because girls are good with math.
So as coming from my guyness here, and who husband, brother, father, son, what do the men out there need to know, whatever role they're in and the multiple roles they're in, what role can they play in a very constructive, positive way to address these issues we've laid out for the last hour, right? And you have a lot of advice for the women, as you should, because the women you want them to take self-agency, whether they're in crises or not, whatever. But there are men in their lives. Now, as much as there's been, let's say, bad male behavior around this, let's just then say, if we're going to reframe this, then men have to be part of the equation.
Absolutely.
In the various roles that they have. What would you say to the men in all our various roles that we can play here?
I think you have to be open to really listening to the situation, not giving the solution, but really listening to her point of view when she's trying to explain her perspective on a situation. And look at it from your point of view. How would it have been for you versus her? It will take a lot of patience for you to really understand her perspective, because it's such a lived experience. Like, I just see it between myself and my husband. My husband will just walk up and walk in front of somebody and get on the plane. I would never do that. Mm-hmm. But people let him through. He's got a very deep voice, and he'll say, and I want blah, 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 blah. And they'll say, yes, Mr. Tree, And I would come up and go, I would like better. And they'd be like, excuse me. It just is a different approach for men and women. And I read an article where this gentleman was transitioned to be a woman. Mm. And he said his experience as a woman was incredible in the way that he was treated versus when he was a man.
He lived it. I mean,
he lived
everything
it.
that you talked about, as
soon
as it was a gender, same person, right?
Same person.
So I know we're out of time here, but how can fathers bring up their daughters differently? So they get them going. Because father's job, and the mothers too,
teach them everything. Teach them about money. Teach them how to change a tire. Teach them how to put up drywall. Teach them everything you could possibly teach them. I had a woman who said her father wrote a book, and every Sunday he would teach his children something around how to live in the world. Mm-hmm. And it was all those things that we need to know how to live in the world, and it was all those things. And it wasn't, gender specific. It was, how to make your meals, how to do your laundry, how to change your car, how to check your oil, how to balance your checkbook, how to invest, how to how to use those things. Every week you should be teaching your children something that's a life skill that they're not getting in school.
Yeah.
And not make a distinction, right?
That's right, the gender. And actually, this is a really nice transition, because I appreciate what you just said. This is a really good transition, Barb. What we do in the podcast is towards the end is we do what's called Disrupt GPS. So our audience members, that we do Disrupt GPS after we have this great conversation with our guest, or even with one another. We talk about the things that really stood out, or with the takeaways, for us. This is a really nice takeaway. So you asked what can fathers do for daughters, but I have 4 boys. Mm-hmm. And even though I was indoctrinated, socialized into a certain frame, which I've readily shared, and still kind of have to consciously get myself out of, I also am teaching my boys, about how mommy, woman, has a relationship with money, how I'm actively engaging in it, that, and potentially by default because I'm a single mom, but regardless, and talking to them openly about what are you spending, what is in, your thing, but which is typical from what you and I have, talked about. Yes, the boy is going to get that, but also from a female standpoint, you see a female role model that is has agency over her money, knows how to make the decisions, is not shameful about that. I'm also holding the budget, those kinds of things. So from a parenting standpoint, especially from a woman to a man or boys, I also think about that in terms mm-hmm. of, how are you kind of shifting the culture? How are you ensuring that when they grow older, if they fall in love with a woman, and they have their relationship, that it is a positive relationship with money and with the woman, and it is just a thing, mm-hmm. like you said, that you talk about as easy as it would be to talk about, I love you, and we can talk about money, mm-hmm. and I love you, mm-hmm. It is, bookended. So for me, that's a clear GPS, for me. And really the second thing, this has been, it is often, and Andrés knows this, there is often times when we meet with a guest, and it is almost like therapy for me. This has actually been like therapy for me. So personally, I'm telling you, Barb, I'm gonna, and my financial advisor will thank you, I'm gonna get on that budget today. I'm gonna work on my budget, and because I have anxiety, because I have kind of deep-seated disengagement with it, because it's like, and I love how you were saying, I should know you, but I don't know how to know you. I should know more about you, but I don't really know how to know more about you. I found myself kind of lost in that, actually, because I find that when I look at the budget sheet, I'm like, I kind of want to know, but it's okay, like you're cool. And I kind of flirt with it, but then I'm like, you're good. You go do whatever you want to do, but I have no clue about this thing. I don't know. Why am I negative all of a sudden? Well, I could know, but I'm not going to engage in it. So my point is that to change my relationship, even myself, to understand that I'm still indoctrinated, in this, and that's okay, not to have shame in it, just to move forward, with it. So that's a takeaway for me.
Yeah, my disrupt GPS is going back to the father-daughter one. The women that I've met, adult women who are really comfortable with money, are the ones whose parents, and in particular their fathers, did what you suggested. That the fathers did not make a distinction from a gender perspective, and they might have been the only daughter, or many times they were just in a mixed gender family, but that the father played a key role in that, and so she knew how to change a tire, and it kind of went with, and she knew about money, and that money is, something that you can make money off of, and all those things you're talking about. So that, I think that's a great takeaway. And hey, fathers out there, please. And it's so simple.
It is simple.
I mean, bottom line, and it's so powerful in a lifetime of skill, right?
Yeah.
The other GPS one is on seeing that it's a relationship with money. And as soon as you reframe it, then it's multiple, right? You have a relationship with money and money with you. And then since it's a relationship with money, then whatever significant, meaningful, romantic relationship you're in, that should be part of the dynamic, right? That money should not be treated separate from all the other assets and liabilities that are emotional or personality-wise, right? That is part of the romance game and the long-term relationship one. And I would say that, and this is a bigger, ambitious thing, but we are about big and ambitious things.
Sure,
we are.
I would challenge corporations to really look in the mirror and
great.
see what your role is in the pink tax, because that is outrageous.
Yeah.
and it's a systematic dilution of women's wealth and
worth and power. Yeah.
And all the hard work they do to earn their money, and yet we're extracting extra because they're women. Yeah, look in the mirror.
Amen.
I love it. So Barb, as we're closing, why don't you tell our guests where they can find you?
Sure. PurseStrings is at PurseStrings.co, not .com, because that was an $85,000 investment I couldn't afford at the time. So
Smart financial choice.
I know. So PurseStrings.co, and on PurseStrings you'll find a lot of free tools and resources and access to our vetted directory of financial professionals who serve women. We're across the United States. And you can get our podcast, which is Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about.
I love
Oh, nice.
And you can join our newsletter and get all sorts of goodies on our site.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What a
Awesome.
pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, it's been
thank you
so
so
fun.
much.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. So for our audience members, we'll provide all of that information to follow Dr. Provo. Of course, as you know, you can always follow Andrés at his website, and he's got some great resources and things. You can also check out my website, and then of course the Disrupt the Podcast. We ask you to like, to comment, follow, and subscribe, and let us know what else you'd like to hear from Dr. Provo, because this is an ongoing conversation. This is not just we're gonna every day. So again, we want to thank you for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Absolutely, and thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah. Ciao.
Ciao.